Thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity to be with you all this summer. This is something that I've heard about since I was a kid in high school about being a part of these camps. And I'm from Texas, Amarillo, Texas, born and raised. And so for whatever reason, I never had an opportunity to come to do these camps and to experience the Abersold experience and now the Louisville Jazz Workshop. Thank you. So I'm a little envious of all of you, having had so many different experiences coming here over the years. But nonetheless, I was able to be educated by some of the folks who were the founders of this program as well as students of the program. So pretty exciting for me. What I'm going to talk to you about today is research of mine that will culminate in a few textbooks that I'm working on, or books rather, not necessarily textbooks. But the first concept is referred to as jazz gestures, creating effective solos through melodic content. So as I mentioned before, my name is Marlin McKay, and I'm very honored to join the faculty of U of L, the amazing faculty at U of L this fall, as the assistant professor of jazz education and African American music and history, which we have our wonderful esteemed professor, Jerry Tolson, who I'll be able to follow in his footsteps. So how about a round for Jerry? Excellent teaching and mentorship. Thank you so much. So to begin, I want to ask the question, why jazz and why improvisation, right? That's probably more of a question for you, and thinking about why are you so excited about this music? Why have you kind of been bitten by the bug, as they say? And I know for many of you it started out with just music in general, but eventually became something that has become much more. And so for me, in my own experience, it was about an emotional connection. When I listened to those recordings, all those famous recordings, I had an emotional reaction to hearing that music. That later led to me wanting to express that emotion myself in my playing. And as I continued to learn and play this music, my mind expanded. So intellectually, I was able to kind of be a part of jazz, and jazz helped me expand my mind. But the last piece is probably the one that everybody keeps coming back here year after year for, and that's the fun. That's the excitement that you get from being able to do all of these with other living, breathing musicians who are equally as excited about this music and this great American art form as you are. I can remember very vividly, for some of you who still have a CD collection, does anybody still have a CD collection in here? Right? Blue Note was like trading cards for me, man, like baseball and football cards. I would collect them, and I would, wait for them to come in the mail. At one point, it was the BGE or Columbia House, and different companies that would ship them to your house. My dad was a freelance disc jockey, and so we would go to Sound Warehouse and buy CDs, and then that became Best Buy and Circuit City and all those places, and we would buy those CDs, and I would tear the plastic off and look at the back and look at the front. It was so artistic and beautiful with, the Francis Wolff, Wolff's photography, and looking on the back, and it had who was on the record, and then you get into the liner notes and you start reading and learning about the history and the music and kind of like why they chose to put it in this key or in that time signature, and it was just fun. It was fun for me. And that's really what kind of inspired me to want to be a part of this great American art form. But wanting to be a part of something is not necessarily enough, right? When we were growing up and trying to, who remember those honor bands, honor jazz bands? Sometimes middle school, sometimes high school, and they would get us all over at a regional school, and we'd start playing. And everything would sound great. Everything would sound great until we got to the chord changes, right? And then all of a sudden it would be like, oh, this is different. Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. How can we make effective jazz solos? Well, before we get to the nuts and bolts of jazz gestures, there are three key elements that I teach all of my students, and that I feel like were sort of quintessential elements of all the jazz that I listened to. One, they had great tones. every time I listened to a record, I was always shocked. And they're not all the same. They were all different tones, but they were all great tones. The second part of it is time, right? They had a great time feel. They were what we call in the pocket or swinging or in the groove. Remember, if it don't mean a thing unless they got that swing. That type of aesthetic is what we're going for. And then the final piece is accuracy, whether it was technical accuracy, you know, them hitting the notes, or people like Freddie Hubbard just really kind of blowing in your mind with their technical prowess, or harmonically, right, doing some challenging things and really kind of hitting the changes, as they say, in a unique and expressive way. That was sort of the prerequisite for being able to play an effective solo. But aside from these prereqs, there's a few simple steps that we can follow to really kind of maximize our efficiency in playing a really good solo. The first one is choosing the right song. This is the Randy of American Idol. You pick the wrong song, dog. You know, it's one of those kind of things. You know, you got to pick the right song. And that comes next is understanding the harmonic progression or formula, right? That's the next stage and next step. And then finally, which is perhaps the most important part of what my concept talks about, is playing with intent, okay? We're going to get into it. So how many of you, like I said before, after we played the song, you get to that, right? You see that. This is a song called My Little Suede Shoes by Charlie Parker. It was released on Mercury Records in 1952. And it was sort of like an experiment for Charlie Parker, who had visited South America and was really excited about the music that he had heard there. So he wrote a series of pieces, all with different rhythms from that region. Oddly enough, some further research showed that My Little Suede Shoes is a combination of two French folk songs. So I don't know how much the south of the border it actually reaches, but it's a really cool, cute, catchy song. But when you look at it, you look at the chord changes, and how many of you felt like this when you were a kid and you saw those chord changes, all of this business, right? Math, all combined, like I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I have no idea what to make of this. It's Greek to me. I felt that way when I would look at the changes. And sometimes the only thing I could get was the first letter of the song. And I was like, okay, G something maybe. Well, aside from this section here that's circled, which is a momentary tonicization of G or F, concert F here, the majority or the bulk of this song is in E flat. One sound, one scale, okay? Let's take a little closer look at this. So it's no longer a matter of what, since we know what it is. We know it's E flat major, right? It's more so now a matter of when. When do I play, right? Because I know I'm in E flat major, and everybody can play their E flat major scale here in this room. I'm certain of it, because I heard you guys during the audition. It sounded great, by the way. So now we got to talk about the when, right? And that's where we come to the key point of playing with intent, right? We're going to focus on, in the next few slides, of how do we play with intent? How do we play the when of the music and of the solo? All right. Now, this is a reference to a movie that some of you may have watched. Uncle Drew. Anybody in the room seen Uncle Drew? Maybe a few of you. Well, even if you haven't seen Uncle Drew, you've seen this particular character out. If you've played sports ever in your life, or especially sandlot pickup ball, there's always that one player that has, from head to toe, LeBron James shoes, the Nike socks pulled up to their kneecaps, the full Laker uniform and the sweatband on their head, and you ask them to come out on the court to play, and the first thing they do if they get the ball is they start doing all this behind the back stuff and between the legs, and it's just a hot mess. If you're not laughing, it may be you. But if any of you have ever played basketball, right, what is the highest percentage shot that you can take? A simple layup. And that's what I want to show you how to do today, is to how to do a simple layup with creating effective solos using melodic content. Okay, So, I've analyzed and listened to hundreds of solos. And of all of the solos that I've ever listened to, right, they all sort of boil down to 5 key components. 5 key components based on melody and making melodic statements, okay? Digital and intervallic patterns and sequences, or sequencing that information, right, which simply means taking an idea and moving it to the next key change or the next set of the chord progression. Pentatonics, right? Riffs and rhythmic devices. Blues and quoting, which was a lot of my fun when I was first starting to play. I remember when I started trying to play jazz, I would always quote Mama's Little Baby, like shortening bread. And I remember my teacher in my undergrad telling me, okay, Marlin, one, I think you've exhausted the 8th note. Okay, we gotta try a different rhythm. And second, if I hear you quote Mama's Little Baby one more time, I'm gonna puke. Well, he was actually not right about that. And it was actually damaging in some ways because I was afraid to do it anymore. So I stopped utilizing idiomatically correct language from that particular era of music. It was very important for me to quote because that's what the masters did. So rather, he should have said was, hey, try triplets and try Sleigh Ride. Play that one, right? Rather than saying don't do something, let's add to. Let's go an additive process. Let's give you something else to work with, right? Teachers are so important. They are so important in the development of all of us, right? And it's important to remember that because whether or not you're a certified teacher, like some of us in the room, the fact that you expanded your mind intellectually, you are going to be a teacher to someone of this music, right? At some point in your life. So remember that it's always positive to add something to what someone's doing rather than to take away, okay? All right, let's talk about a few of these. Now, they're all components of the solo. We could technically take any one of these components and play an effective solo, right? You could take any one of those aspects. For instance, if I took the pentatonic, for instance, and that's the one that most people, common, that they use. Excuse me one second. Okay, I'm just gonna play a little bit of the progression to You Stepped Out of a Dream. Really nice, pretty song, one of my favorites. And I'm going to play that. And I'm going to utilize this shape or this idea, right? Right? All right? Now, remember what I said. It's not a matter of what, it's a matter of when. So if you look at a measure of music, right, there are obviously other places that you can have as a point of departure, but you definitely have the downbeat, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4, and the ands of all of those beats to start those ideas. Now I want you to see how everything changes and the shape of it changes just by me moving that idea around, okay? You can move and shift those things around. Now, that's effective. If you did that, nobody would say, oh man, he's a terrible, terrible player to play that way. But that's not all that you're used to hearing when you're hearing jazz musicians perform and play, right? They're utilizing all of these different points. But I want you to think about it, not that you can do them all at the same time, because you really cannot, right? You can't do all of these at the same time. So I want you to think of, in your intent dial, of turning it. Okay, I'm going to do blues, Okay, now I'm going to do a riff. I'm going to shift back. Okay, now I'm going to do a pentatonic idea. Okay, now I'm going to shift back and I'm going to do a quote, or I'm going to shift forward and I'm going to do a riff. That's how I want you to think about it. And that's going to give you control, right? If you have control, then you have the ability to make things happen sort of and sound relaxed, which is one of those tenets of hearing jazz musicians play. They always sound relaxed and composed no matter what they're doing. So in order to demonstrate a little bit of this, I'm going to go back to that song, My Little Suede Shoes, and demonstrate a few of these concepts of this shift here. Now, that's not the total package, right? I want you to think about it as an ABC approach. If A is your melodic content that you're going to play, one of these 5 areas, right? C is your final destination or your phrase endings. What about that B? What are we going to do with that B? Connecting material, right? We're going to utilize diatonic, linear, and vertical motion to connect the dots. Chromatic, linear, and vertical motion. So what do I mean by that? So if I'm in E flat major or concert E flat, this is all the stuff that you practice in all of those books. Remember, I'm not trying to take anything away from you. I'm trying to give you something, right? So all of those books that you've ever purchased or bought, from Aebersold to Coker to Tolson to whoever it is out there, you can utilize those. They've given you tons of things to play, right? Like this. Right? We call that connecting material. That's how we get from one idea to the next. So if I play, right? Now I'm moving. Before, you have a static thing that you're kind of sitting on, a melodic idea rather, a statement, and now you're starting to move down the street with your connecting material, right? These are what we call linear, diatonic, and chromatic and vertical motion exercises. The other one is bebop construction, right? That's where you get that kind of stuff, right? So that's your connecting material, right? Now, you've heard people play entire solos with that information, and you totally can. You can make the changes by playing bebop, or you can add more melody to your solos by utilizing one of those 5 techniques that I talked about before. Okay, so let's take a look. How many of you have always wondered about diminished scales, augmented scales, and whole tone, any of these things, right? Okay. The cool thing about this is, a jazz master taught me this, Ornette Coleman. In a documentary from 1959, the year that changed jazz, he talked about that there's only 12 tones satisfying the entire world. 12 tones. So if you look at from E flat to D, right, those are our 11 notes with the repeat being the 12th tone, the E flat. Everything that's within that diatonic scale is what we call consonant information, and there's a few dissonances which I talk about in another book I'm working on called tonal weight system. But everything else that's part of that chromatic scale are the dissonances that we utilize that come from the diminished scale, the whole tone, the augmented scale. So once again, if you know that you're in E flat major, right, and then you want to add a little spice, intentionally go to one of those notes and just sit on it. I'll demonstrate in a little bit, but I'll show you what I'm talking about. I call that static harmony, right? This is what we refer to as static harmony. The test, right? Okay, so here's the test. Before we get to the test, I'm going to demonstrate a few of those exercises. Right, she's like, you didn't think you would get out without a test, right? Okay, I'm going to go back to our little 5 here and the chord progression. Feel free, if you have iRealB, to follow along with the changes, but you already know we're in the key of E flat major. And I'm just going to show you how you can take those ideas and create solos from it. Okay. pentatonics, I did some quoting, right? And that's all of the different pieces and parts all kind of put together. Now, your job is to practice each one of them until you feel comfortable. We want to move from a place of comfort. Comfort creates confidence, right? So it's okay to be where you are as a player. I am where I am. I'm not Coltrane. But it's important for you to understand that you're still painting with the same paints. If I paint with blue, right? And my blue might be cobalt blue. John Coltrane's might be cerulean. It's a fancy word, but it's still blue. And I'm working towards being able to paint with that blue. Does that make sense? But I can still paint an effective picture with the blue that I have. Okay, so here's the test. Now that you know those 5, and your ears have now been opened because your mind is open, I want you to listen to a solo of a trumpet player playing My Little Suede Shoes, and you're going to hear him play these various components, and I want you to think about it. You feel free to write it down when you hear one of those 5 elements, right? We're going to review them again. Riffs and rhythmic devices, digital patterns, pentatonics, blues, and quoting, okay? All right, here we go. I think I can do this. Yay. saxophonists in the building. I know y'all already can. I felt the zap already. Like, hey, I want to hear that solo. Hear that? So we can go back and finish and listen. I want to, in the interest of time, leave it open for questions as well, but we can certainly end with watching the full performance. Here are the answers to the test. They open with the riff, right? He could do that through the whole song. You could just sit there and sit on that all day long. So that's what we call it a riff. It's because it's a short, repeated melodic statement that is able to traverse different changes, right? Chord changes going underneath it because of its harmonic, I guess, connectivity through the whole thing. That's the best way to say it. Okay, connecting material, where he was going. Right, he just moved that shape down. So he took that first shape and he moved it. So that's a sequence, and he used it as connecting material, right? Linear motion. Just meaning went in a line through the scale. That was the next section.
It's also a chord.
Exactly, right? If he does, well, he didn't finish here, right?
Yeah,
Right, if you do the Christmas song. He had a quote in there. He did another sequence, and then he switched the dial and went to the blues. Did everybody hear that? That's usually the one that most folks can hear most, clearly. He played in the blues for a while, and then he did static harmony. You might not have heard that when I caught that one. When he said, which comes from, excuse me, right? There's your diminished scale right there. So that's your static harmony that he's using to connect from one idea to the next. Sequence again, that's where he's playing really lyrical. Now he chooses to use a sequence as his lyricism. Did you notice that? That's where he kind of borrowed the Kenny Dorham bending notes and kind of scooping in the sounds. That's where he was utilizing that. Followed by a riff. This. It's a riff. It's going over the top of a bunch of different chord changes. You could do it through the entire song. Then he went up the, still a riff, right? Connecting material, linear motion to another riff. Then he's back to the blues. He's switching to the blues again. Starts off with the riff again. But some false fingering things that you would hear at the top of the second chorus, right? He goes into a bebop quote from a song, right? Then he does bebop construction where he just lays out a bunch of stuff like what I was playing earlier. Back to the blues again. And finally, connecting material sequence, chromaticism again, a riff, and some vertical motion to end this solo. So did everybody hear those? Were you able to hear those? When you took your test, did you catch some of that? Some of it, right? Better question is, does it make sense, right? Is it clear how you're getting there? And so it doesn't matter how complex the idea. Actually, it's probably better the simpler the idea as a jump-off point, the better. For instance, this song is simply analysis of that song, that's pretty much what it is, right? And so a very famous jazz saxophonist by the name of Hadley Callman told me this information when I was a young kid just studying in my undergrad. He told me two things. He said, look, there's two chords. There's tonic and there's dominant. If you're not on the tonic, then you're on some form of the dominant, and that includes the diminished scales. That's just extra tension, extra tension and release. And then he taught me the bebop scale, which I was like, I don't know, I didn't understand how it all worked. Still working on it, right? Everybody in this room, we're all working on it. We're still continuing to work on it. And I'm fortunate that I'm able to spend my 44th birthday today continuing to work on it. So I feel very blessed. So I want to leave time for questions. Does anybody have any questions or anything that you'd like to know? Or
So there was no pentatonics in it?
yes, yes. So pentatonics are interesting because of, and I talked about this with my group earlier, my combo. It's the same 12 tones. It's just a matter of how you choose to reorganize how they fall, right? So I can take a G major scale, right? And I can play it tertian harmony. Or I can switch it and play. I mean, it's still G major. It's still the same notes, but the way I reorganized them, it made it sound a lot more like 1965 or even beyond than 1955. Does that make sense? So when you're hearing them play pentatonics, if you actually transcribed it and went through the whole thing, you would hear he probably did it in a little bit more of a sophisticated way, or maybe even a more simplified way that sounded more diatonic and less dissonant. Great question. Yes?
When you're in the zone improvising, you're not thinking about, okay, now I'm going to switch to one of these other instruments. You're just, the zone's changing, coming out.
Well, I mean, it's like, look at it this way. You remember being 15 and preparing for your driver's ed test and driving? You remember getting in the car and actually noticing when your foot hit the gas pedal? Okay, now you come home from work and you forgot how you got there. You end up in the driveway and you're like, did I pass some of this? You know what I mean? It's the muscle memory and the practice over and over that some of this stuff just kind of becomes innate, and you start to operate on intuition, and now you're listening because you're not worried about how to actually make the strokes happen. Does that make sense?
So you're not thinking about switching from one to another, it just comes out, and then you analyze it and figure it out just a little.
I am thinking about it, but my level of thinking is at a higher level. So it may be something that I'm putting out. It may be something that the pianist is pushing me towards, or I might have heard something that the last player played, or the bass player might have inspired me to play something. It's all homogenized, but the work is still in there. We still had to shake it up. Does that make sense? We had to put the parts in there and shake it up real good, and then we play. But yes, I'm thinking of those, just not as slowly as probably a beginner would. Does that sound bad that I'm thinking of that? Like when I want to play bluesy? I mean, I'm feeling the music, but I have to be in control and I have to have my intellect somewhere in the picture so that I know how to use those components and when. Remember when, the when part. Great question though. What's your name by the way?
Steve.
Steve. Yes.
Hi.
Yes, sir. Your name?
David.
David.
Triad pairs.
Uh-huh.
I've been screwing around with those for a while now.
Yep.
Where would they fit in?
Jazz Gestures Volume 2. Give me a break, man. I'm 44 years old. I just figured out something. No, it's okay, so if you take C major, right, and you take the tritone, right, another major triad, I'll point you in the direction of a record. That'll probably be better for you. If you go and listen to Donald Byrd, Royal Flush, right, he does an excellent job. He's such an educator. He's a brilliant man. He does an excellent job of showing you the progression of bebop, diatonicism, all the way to triad pairs. And he plays a line that goes, right? So that's triad pairs. And so you can utilize that, remember, anywhere. Because remember, there's only two chords. There's tonic and there's dominant. So you can drop that in anytime you want to, but most folks tend to drop that in when there's an open space, like modal playing, or at the end of a phrase, like if you're trying to create some tension on the dominant, right? But you can drop it in anywhere you like. It's about how playing with intent. There's no wrong notes, just wrong intentions. Right.
Could you give me some solos to transcribe and start solos?
Which part of the? Yeah, absolutely. So the best record that you can transcribe for guitar is Grant Green's Standards. He plays all the standards. He doesn't comp. Nothing's in the way. and you just hear straight melody, and he goes through every single one of these components because I transcribed a bunch of his solos for the concert. So yeah, you can definitely, and he plays standards that are pretty just like, I can hear this. You know what I mean? Nothing crazy or weird. And keep in mind that most of the Great American Songbook is all the stuff that I just showed you, right? And they just might be moving to a couple of keys, but it's still the same idea. Like earlier today, we played On the Trail. On the Trail is in 2 keys. The majority of it is in concert F, and then for 4 bars, it goes to F sharp. That's it. It's just a simple tune, but it's hard if you don't know how to switch and when to switch. It can become kind of a daunting task. So the book that I'm writing, The Derivative Approach to Jazz Improvisation, starts you off with 1 key, 1 tonal center, like this song that we're talking about now, My Little Suede Shoes, and then it progresses you to On the Trail, and then All the Things You Are, and then, you know, which takes a tonal, 1 tonality, and then it moves it up. The same thing, same information, just moved up, right? So once you navigate and learn how to play in that tonal center, then you move to the next tonal center. Does that make sense? You guys have great questions. Any other questions?
Marlin,
Yes, yes.
how would you go about if you were just starting to learn to do this in your practice sessions? What would you do?
Well, so in the book, right? That's not a shameless plug. Trust me. It has all of these different ideas. I've transcribed a lot of them. And here's the thing: with all of those other books, because we're theorists, sometimes we'll write arbitrary. We'll take numbers and arbitrarily grab them from the major scale, right, and just apply those numbers. Like I remember one of my teachers told me, "Oh, just go to the phone book and take out anybody's phone number and play that over, play that pattern, play that pattern." You know what that sounded like? It sounded like Donna Smith. Like it didn't sound like Dexter Gordon. It didn't sound like idiomatically correct music to what I'm playing. So there's something about the way these jazz masters organized and selected melodic content from the scale to present, right? There's a certain frequency, a certain energy that they put out with that. And so what I've done is taken those pieces, like Stanley Tarantine playing a blues idea, right? And I've put that into the book so that now you just practice utilizing that. And then you play a song like My Little Suede Shoes and you just play it until you get sick or until it feels really comfortable. You're not thinking about it anymore, right? And as you start to practice these different techniques, then you get to the point to where, okay, I'm gonna try 2 of them. I'm gonna do like a blues idea and I'm gonna play a quote. So I'm gonna quote and then I'm gonna play the blues. I'm gonna quote and then I'm gonna play the blues. Like, I don't know. Right? Just whatever it is. I mean, all you're trying to do is to survey the land so that you know how to navigate. And then after you practice that stuff enough, you go to the jam sessions or you go and play with your bands and you allow intuition because now you know the what and you know the when to take over. And now you're reacting to your bandmates and to the audience. You never believe how many times I play Sleigh Ride and people come, they laugh first. They hear a Christmas song in July on a song that they didn't expect. And then they come up and they say, "Man, that you played, what was that you played? You played, Sleigh Ride." That's connection. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect with our band members. We're trying to connect with the audience so that we're all uplifted and we have a good time, right? One final piece about your triad pairs, right? How many times can you go outside of a door? How many times can you open that door to go outside if you're in the house? Huh? Once. So if I play, you see what I'm saying? I'm taking a shape shaping an idea, I set your ear up and your mind up to hear what I'm dealing with, and then I started moving you, and I moved you outside. And if I did that against the chord changes, you would hear and feel it as, ooh, he's outside, that little ooh feeling. That's where it comes from. Now that's a simplified version of it. And once again, we're painting with light blue. John Coltrane's playing with cerulean. So you just kind of learn how to increase your blue palette over time. Great question. Anybody else? Yeah, Josh?
Where can we get that?
I'm hoping to have it done by the end of this summer. I put it in the high gear for this camp just so I could get some things down on paper, but I'm hoping to have it done by this summer. And he has, Mike and Jerry have all your contact information. I'll be sure to let you know as soon as it's available, so that you can hopefully enjoy the process of practicing again, which, I mean, if all I had to do was play melodies and gestures and things instead of freaking out about, chord changes, I think I'd be a lot happier working on it, right? Well, what time is it? Oh, perfect. But if anybody has any other questions, I'll be here all week. Yeah, that wasn't a joke. That wasn't intended. That was like straight out. I've studied too much shtick, right? Okay. Thank you so very much for giving me your attention and allowing me to talk to you this afternoon about my love and my passion, and I sincerely hope that it has helped you in some way. So thank you very much.